Welcome to Starlight Sci-Fi, where humanity's imagination meets the cosmos. Prepare for thrilling tales of survival, courage, and ingenuity. Hit subscribe and embark on a journey across the stars. The Drakthar were undefeated for millennia, a species of biological perfection forged in the crucible of countless wars. When they declared humanity a nuisance and demanded our unconditional surrender, the galaxy waited with bated breath. Surely the upstart species would be annihilated. Yet, when the dust settled, the Drakthar Empire was gone, and humanity stood victorious. But how? Even now, no one knows the full story. Let's dive into the chilling tale of humanity's greatest and bloodiest triumph. The Drakthar were the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy. Towering 10 feet tall, their bodies were sheathed in organic armor harder than steel. They possessed razor-sharp claws capable of rending metal, and their strength was unmatched, able to tear apart battle mechs with ease. Evolution had sculpted them into perfect warriors, and millennia of conquest had refined their tactics to devastating precision. Entire civilizations had crumbled beneath their relentless advance, leaving the galaxy littered with the ruins of species who had dared to defy them. For the Drakthar, conquest wasn't just a way of life, it was their very identity. When humanity emerged into the galactic scene, we were little more than an afterthought to the Drakthar. To them, we were weak, a species reliant on machines and technology to compensate for our frail biology. Our short lifespans, fragile physiques, and inability to survive without carefully controlled environments only reinforced the perception that humans were a minor, insignificant species. For a time, they ignored us. Our early colonies spread quietly through the outer edges of the galaxy, establishing footholds on barren worlds and building outposts in the shadows of more established empires. But humanity's rapid growth soon became impossible to overlook. Within a century, our colonies had multiplied across hundreds of star systems. Entire planets were terraformed, their atmospheres transformed to mimic Earth's. Trade routes flourished, and human ingenuity led to innovations that even the most advanced species took notice of. To the Drakthar, this was intolerable. They saw humanity's expansion as an affront to rising power threatening their unchallenged dominance. But it wasn't just humanity's growth that provoked them, it was our defiance of their expectations. Humans weren't just surviving, we were thriving in conditions where many species would have withered. The Drakthar, driven by pride and the need to assert their supremacy, decided to act. The warning came in the form of a single broadcast. Across every human colony, from the bustling metropolises of Mars to the farthest mining stations on the fringes of the galaxy, a message was delivered. The image of a Drakthar warlord, a towering figure with glowing amber eyes and a voice like grinding stone, filled every screen. Submit or perish. There was no negotiation, no attempt at diplomacy. The Drakthar didn't negotiate. To them, the act of surrendering was a mercy they rarely extended. The galaxy watched with morbid curiosity, fully expecting humanity to accept the inevitable. What hope could such a fragile species have against the mightiest warriors the galaxy had ever known? But humanity did not submit. Not because we believed we could win, but because surrender was never an option. Our history was filled with struggles against impossible odds, whether against nature, against each other, or against the void itself. Humanity had always found a way to endure. Within hours, the United Terran Command transmitted humanity's response. The message was short, almost dismissive, yet it carried an undercurrent of defiance that shocked even the most cynical observers. Come and try. The Drakthar took the challenge as expected with savage enthusiasm. For them, this was no ordinary campaign. It was a hunt. A chance to crush an upstart species and reaffirm their position at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Humanity had dared to resist. Now they would pay the price. The galaxy waited, bracing for what everyone assumed would be a swift and brutal annihilation. Yet, unbeknownst to the Drakthar and their vassals, humanity had been preparing for this moment. In the shadows of our colonies and the depths of our research facilities, we had been building weapons, strategies, and alliances. We knew the Drakthar would come, and we knew what they were capable of. What neither the galaxy nor the Drakthar understood, however, was that humanity's greatest strength was never its technology or its numbers. It was our unyielding resolve, This was not the first time humanity had faced extinction. It wouldn't be the last. The Drakthar thought they had declared war. In reality, they had unleashed something far more dangerous, humanity's will to survive. The Drakthar didn't hesitate. Their war machines surged forward like an unstoppable tide, striking humanity's colonies with precision and ferocity. Their first target was Arcadia Prime, humanity's largest and most prosperous Banbarus colony. Located at the crossroads of key trade routes, it was a symbol of human ambition and resilience. The Drakthar intended to make an example of it. When the Drakthar fleet arrived in Arcadian space, the colony's defenses stood little chance. Their ships dwarfed human vessels in both size and firepower. Towering dreadnoughts bristling with plasma cannons tore through the orbital defenses with clinical efficiency. Within hours, the skies above Arcadia Prime were alight with fire as debris from destroyed satellites and defense platforms rained down upon the planet below. The Drakthar didn't stop there. Their bombardment was systematic, obliterating entire cities with orbital strikes. They targeted power grids, communication hubs, and supply lines, plunging the colony into chaos. Billions of lives were lost as the Drakthar rained destruction upon the surface, their assault leaving no corner untouched. The few survivors who managed to flee the planet carried with them stories of horror, the skies turning red with fire, the ground trembling as entire cities were reduced to ash, and the haunting sight of Drakthar troops descending to the surface to hunt down any who remained. To the galaxy, this seemed like a decisive blow. Arcadia Prime wasn't just a colony, it was humanity's pride, a beacon of what we could achieve beyond Earth. Its destruction sent shockwaves through every human settlement, a grim reminder of what the Drakthar were capable of. Many species, watching from a distance, believed humanity's resistance would crumble under the weight of this overwhelming loss. But the Drakthar had made a critical mistake. They saw the destruction of Arcadia Prime as the beginning of their victory. To humanity, it was a rallying cry. In the aftermath of Arcadia Prime, the United Terran Command convened in secrecy. The war wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that humanity couldn't be erased so easily. The Drakthar had underestimated us, and humanity's leaders resolved to exploit that arrogance. They activated Project Aegis, a desperate initiative that had been in development since humanity first encountered the Drakthar on the Galactic stage. Unlike the Drakthar, who relied on brute strength and overwhelming force, humanity would fight with ingenuity. We couldn't meet them head-on, but we didn't need to. While the Drakthar reveled in dominance, humanity's greatest strength was our ability to adapt. The first phase of Project Aegis was set into motion, a campaign of asymmetric warfare. Teams of human operatives infiltrated Drakthar supply chains, sabotaging shipments of food and weapons. Advanced viruses designed by human engineers infected their fleet systems, causing critical malfunctions in their starships. On the battlefield, decoy fleets lured Drakthar warships into traps, where hidden minefields and long-range artillery tore through their ranks. The Drakthar were unprepared for this type of warfare. They were used to fighting opponents who either surrendered or fought in straightforward, predictable ways. Humanity was neither. Every Drakthar victory came at an increasingly steep cost. Their fleets were stretched thin, their supply lines disrupted, and their soldiers demoralized by an enemy that struck from the shadows and disappeared before they could retaliate. But the Drakthar were not easily deterred. They adapted quickly, deploying genetically enhanced hunters to track down human operatives. These new Drakthar troops were faster, stronger, and capable of detecting even the faintest traces of human presence. Entire infiltration teams began vanishing without a trace. The survivors who managed to escape told stories of relentless pursuit and brutal executions. Still, humanity persisted. Each blow we struck, no matter how small, was a reminder to the Drakthar that we would not be cowed. Even as they hunted us, even as our colonies burned, we fought back. The Drakthar had assumed humanity would crumble in the face of overwhelming power. Instead, they had awakened a species that refused to go quietly into the night. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Humanity's resilience, our ability to endure even the most devastating losses, was something the Drakthar had not anticipated. Their invasion, once thought to be an unstoppable force, had met an enemy that refused to break. The first blow had been dealt, and it was devastating. But humanity's response was a reminder to the Drakthar and to the galaxy that this war was far from over. The Drakthar war machine was built for conquest, not attrition. For millennia, they had relied on brute strength, swift strikes, and overwhelming force to crush their enemies. Their victories came quickly, and their campaigns rarely lasted more than a few years. Against humanity, however, they encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. Humanity's strategy was unconventional from the outset. The destruction of Arcadia Prime had driven home a harsh reality: we couldn't win a direct fight. Our ships were smaller, our soldiers weaker, and our weapons inferior. But what we lacked in physical might, we made up for with ingenuity, persistence, and a deep understanding of how to wage war in the shadows. The first wave of counterattacks wasn't launched by fleets or armies, but by teams of highly trained operatives. These men and women, drawn from humanity's best and brightest, infiltrated Drakthar-controlled territories with a single purpose: to sow chaos. They started with the supply chains. Drakthar logistics were a marvel of efficiency, moving food, fuel, and munitions across vast distances to support their sprawling war fronts. But even the most robust systems have vulnerabilities. Human operatives exploited these mercilessly. They planted explosives in cargo ships, sabotaged manufacturing facilities, and introduced genetically engineered viruses into the Drakthar's cloned food sources. Entire battalions of Drakthar soldiers began to starve, their rations spoiled or rendered toxic by unseen saboteurs. The attacks escalated over time. Power plants on Drakthar-occupied worlds mysteriously failed, plunging entire regions into darkness. Weapons depots exploded without warning, devastating their troops and leaving front lines unarmed. Communication networks were infiltrated, allowing human hackers to spread disinformation and disrupt their coordination. To the Drakthar, these tactics were infuriating. They prided themselves on their martial prowess and found this style of warfare dishonorable, even cowardly. But their disdain didn't make them any less vulnerable. Every loss they suffered eroded their once unshakable confidence. The galaxy began to take notice. Species that had long been subjugated by the Drakthar watched humanity's efforts with growing admiration and fear. No one had ever stood against the Drakthar in this way. No one had dared to challenge their might without relying on sheer strength. Humanity's defiance was inspiring, but it was also dangerous. If the Drakthar crushed us, they would only grow stronger and more vengeful. Recognizing the threat, the Drakthar adapted. They deployed elite hunting parties, genetically modified warriors designed to sniff out and eliminate human operatives. These hunters were terrifyingly effective. Infiltration teams began disappearing, their final transmissions filled with panicked reports of being pursued by creatures faster and more cunning than anything they had encountered. Humanity responded in kind, pushing deeper into unconventional warfare. Decoy operations were staged to draw the hunters into traps, where mines and long-range artillery awaited them. Autonomous drones prowled behind enemy lines, striking critical targets before vanishing without a trace. Even as we lost agents, we made sure their sacrifices weren't in vain. But the Drakthar weren't the only ones adapting. Humanity's scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to stay one step ahead. They developed advanced stealth technology, cloaking devices, and AI systems to enhance our operatives' capabilities. Each setback was a lesson, each loss a motivation to fight harder. The Shadow War raged across the galaxy, unseen by most but felt everywhere. The Drakthar's once unassailable war machine was beginning to falter. Their fleets, already stretched thin by humanity's sabotage efforts, were forced to divert resources to protect their supply lines. Morale among their soldiers plummeted as they realized they were no longer invincible. Yet, this war in the shadows came at a cost. The Drakthar's retaliation was brutal. Human colonies on the outskirts of the conflict were systematically eradicated, their populations massacred in an attempt to break our will. Propaganda broadcasts from the Drakthar painted humanity as cowardly vermin, unworthy of survival. Despite the losses, humanity endured. The Shadow War wasn't about winning battles, it was about forcing the Drakthar to fight a war they couldn't sustain. Every act of sabotage, every strike behind enemy lines, was a reminder that we would not submit. The Drakthar had sought to dominate us, but they had only awakened a species willing to do whatever it took to survive. In their arrogance, the Drakthar had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, our ability to adapt and fight on our own terms. The Shadow War was far from over, but it had already shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The Drakthar's war of conquest had ground to a crawl. What had begun as a lightning-fast campaign to crush humanity had devolved into a grinding stalemate. The Shadow War had bled their resources dry, disrupted their carefully crafted supply chains, and stretched their fleets to the breaking point. But while the Drakthar's arrogance began to crack, humanity was far from complacent. In the depths of the Sol system, humanity's greatest minds worked tirelessly to develop new technologies and strategies to turn the tide completely. Project Aegis, once a desperate contingency plan, had evolved into a full-scale initiative. Its focus was clear: to transform humanity from a defensive force into an offensive one. We couldn't just survive, we had to strike back. At the heart of Project Aegis was the creation of Vanguard-class warships, a new breed of human starships designed to outmaneuver and outgun the Drakthar's behemoth vessels. These ships weren't built for brute force, they were designed for speed, precision, and adaptability. Equipped with advanced cloaking systems, modular weapon platforms, and AI-assisted targeting, the Vanguards were a testament to human ingenuity. But the true game-changer came from an unlikely source: reverse-engineered Drakthar technology. Early in the war, humanity had managed to capture several Drakthar vessels during sabotage missions. These wrecks, though heavily damaged, provided invaluable insights into the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. Scientists discovered flaws in the Drakthar's energy shielding, exploitable gaps in their ship designs, and vulnerabilities in their neural communication systems. Armed with this knowledge, humanity began deploying disruption weapons. These devices emitted pulses of electromagnetic energy tuned specifically to interfere with Drakthar shields and neural interfaces. Entire Drakthar fleets found themselves disabled mid-battle, their once impenetrable defenses crumbling under human ingenuity. The first test of these new technologies came in the Battle of Vega's Reach. The Drakthar had launched an assault on a key human outpost guarding a vital trade route. It was a trap. As the Drakthar fleet closed in, a squadron of Vanguard-class ships emerged from the planet's shadow, their cloaking fields dropping in unison. Before the Drakthar could react, the Vanguards fired their disruption weapons. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Drakthar ships powered down, their shields flickering out and engines going cold. Human forces moved in swiftly, targeting the now vulnerable ships with surgical precision. The once dominant Drakthar fleet was reduced to smoldering wreckage in hours. The victory at Vega's Reach sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time, the Drakthar had been defeated in open combat. To humanity, it was a turning point, a validation of our resilience and resourcefulness. To the Drakthar, it was an affront to their supremacy. The Drakthar's response was predictable. They redoubled their efforts, deploying more fleets, more soldiers, and more resources to crush humanity. But the cracks in their war machine were beginning to show. Their overextension, coupled with humanity's relentless guerrilla tactics and technological advances, was eroding their ability to maintain control. The galaxy watched with growing astonishment. Species that had once feared and submitted to the Drakthar began to question their invincibility. Some whispered of rebellion, emboldened by humanity's defiance. Others began to reach out discreetly, offering supplies, intelligence, or even soldiers to aid humanity's cause. Humanity, however, remained focused. We knew the war was far from over. The Drakthar were still a formidable enemy, capable of devastating entire worlds with ease. But the balance of power was shifting. The Battle of Vega's Reach was just the beginning. As the Vanguard fleet expanded and more disruption weapons were deployed, humanity began launching counteroffensives into Drakthar-controlled territories. These strikes were precise and devastating, targeting key installations, supply depots, and shipyards. Each victory weakened the Drakthar further, forcing them to retreat from systems they had once ruled unchallenged. Humanity's resurgence wasn't just a triumph of technology or strategy, it was a testament to our indomitable spirit. The Drakthar had believed they could break us with fear and brute force. Instead, they had forged a species that refused to yield, that thrived in the face of adversity. The tide of the war had begun to turn, but humanity knew better than to grow complacent. The Drakthar were wounded, but they were far from defeated. Their pride and desperation made them more dangerous than ever. The battles ahead would be fiercer, the stakes higher, and the cost greater. But for the first time since the war began, humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. We were fighting to win, and the galaxy was watching. The Drakthar were a species unaccustomed to defeat. For millennia, their campaigns had been defined by swift victories and total subjugation of their enemies. But humanity had shattered that image, and with each passing day, the once feared Drakthar empire was bleeding. Their supply lines were crippled, their fleets spread too thin, and their war machine was losing momentum. The galaxy, once cowed into silence by their dominance, now began to stir with hope. Small pockets of rebellion erupted across Drakthar-controlled worlds, inspired by humanity's defiance. Oppressed species that had endured centuries of servitude began to sabotage their masters, disrupting operations and funneling intelligence to human forces. The Drakthar's once iron grip on their territories was slipping, and their leaders knew it. Faced with the crumbling facade of their supremacy, the Drakthar responded in the only way they knew how, with unrelenting brutality. Their warlords convened and devised a strategy to crush humanity and reassert their dominance in one decisive move. This plan, codenamed Operation Annihilation, was simple yet terrifying in its scope. The Drakthar would gather their remaining fleets and launch a concentrated assault on the Sol system itself. Earth, the cradle of humanity, was their ultimate target. The Drakthar believed that by destroying humanity's homeworld, they could extinguish the spirit of resistance once and for all. It was a gamble born of desperation, but they were willing to risk everything to restore their empire's reputation. In the weeks leading up to the assault, humanity's intelligence networks began to intercept fragments of the Drakthar's plans. The scale of the invasion was staggering. Hundreds of warships were mobilizing, supported by legions of ground troops and orbital bombardment platforms. The sheer size of the armada dwarfed anything humanity had faced before. The United Terran Command knew that the battle for Sol would decide the war. Losing Earth would mean the death of humanity's morale and the loss of countless lives. But surrender was not an option. Humanity had come too far, fought too hard, to falter now. Preparations for the defense of Sol began immediately. Fleets of Vanguard-class warships were recalled from the outer colonies, forming a massive defensive blockade around Earth and its neighboring planets. Orbital platforms were outfitted with the latest in disruption technology, capable of disabling even the most advanced Drakthar vessels. On the ground, Earth's surface bristled with anti-orbital cannons, missile silos, and hidden fortifications designed to withstand even the most relentless bombardment. But humanity wasn't content to simply wait for the Drakthar to arrive. In a bold move, covert teams were deployed deep into Drakthar space to delay their advance. These operatives targeted fuel depots, sabotaged navigation systems, and planted false data in the Drakthar's communications networks, forcing their fleets to take longer, more dangerous routes to Sol. Every day of delay bought humanity more time to prepare. As the Drakthar armada drew closer, tensions in the Sol system reached a breaking point. Civilians were evacuated to underground bunkers, while military personnel worked around the clock to fortify defenses. The people of Earth knew what was at stake, and despite the fear, there was a sense of unity and determination unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The Drakthar's approach was heralded by the arrival of their vanguard fleets, which probed the outer defenses of the Sol system. These skirmishes were brutal, with heavy losses on both sides, but humanity held the line. Every destroyed Drakthar ship, every delay in their advance, was a small but vital victory. The Drakthar's desperation grew with each passing day. They had committed everything to this assault, and the longer it dragged on, the more their weaknesses were exposed. Humanity's resilience and resourcefulness continued to frustrate their plans, and their once unshakable confidence began to erode. But as the full weight of the Drakthar armada finally entered the Sol system, humanity braced for the fight of its existence. The Drakthar believed this was their final chance to crush humanity, to reclaim their place as the galaxy's supreme power. They didn't realize they were walking into the most meticulously prepared trap humanity had ever devised. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and the Drakthar would learn one final, devastating lesson about the species they had underestimated. The Sol system was quiet, too quiet. Beyond the orbits of Neptune and Uranus, the faint glimmers of humanity's defensive fleets hovered in formation, waiting for the storm to arrive. Every sensor, every scanner, every human eye was trained on the blackness of space where the Drakthar armada would emerge. When they finally arrived, it was as if the stars themselves had been extinguished. The Drakthar fleet filled the void, an endless wave of darkened hulls and pulsating energy cores. Hundreds of warships loomed like a massive shadow cast across the system. At its center was the Blood Fang, the flagship of the Drakthar Supreme Commander, a monstrous dreadnought so vast that its silhouette eclipsed moons. The Drakthar had come to make an example of humanity, bringing the full might of their empire to crush Earth. But humanity had been preparing for this moment. Hidden among the asteroid belts and the outer planets were thousands of cloaked mines and automated defense drones. As the Drakthar fleet advanced, the mines activated, their electromagnetic pulses rippling through space. Entire sections of the armada were disabled as ships went dark, their engines frozen and systems fried. The automated drones surged forward, launching precision strikes on the crippled vessels before retreating into the asteroid fields. The first wave of attacks slowed the Drakthar advance, but didn't stop it. Their fleet pushed onward, adjusting formations to avoid further ambushes. The outer defense lines, a mix of orbital platforms and Vanguard-class warships, awaited them near Saturn. As the Drakthar ships closed in, the human defenders struck with precision. Disruption weapons targeted the weakest points of their energy shields, creating openings for devastating missile barrages and railgun fire. The battle in the outer system raged for hours, a cacophony of destruction that lit up the void. The Drakthar were relentless, pouring their forces into the fight with the confidence of a species that had never known true defeat. But humanity was no longer fighting to survive, it was fighting to win. Coordinated strikes and hit-and-run tactics whittled down the invaders, forcing the Drakthar to pay for every inch of ground they gained. When the Drakthar finally breached the outer defenses, they found themselves confronted with a new horror. Hidden within Jupiter's radiation belts were humanity's secret weapons, Helios platforms. These massive, sun-powered cannons unleashed beams of concentrated solar energy, slicing through the Drakthar ships like a blade through armor. Entire formations were obliterated in moments, leaving only smoldering debris behind. Still, the Drakthar pressed on. Their pride demanded nothing less than total victory, and they funneled their remaining forces toward Earth. As they reached the inner planets, they encountered humanity's final line of defense, the Aegis fleet. This was humanity's largest gathering of warships, supported by the latest in cloaking and disruption technology. Unlike the desperate defense of Arcadia Prime, the Aegis fleet was a force honed by years of war, battle-hardened and equipped to exploit every weakness humanity had uncovered in their enemy. The clash between the Aegis fleet and the Drakthar's core armada was ferocious. The skies over Mars became a graveyard of ships, the red planet's surface littered with the debris of the fallen. Humanity's tactics, however, proved decisive. Vanguard-class ships darted through the Drakthar ranks, targeting command ships and supply carriers with pinpoint accuracy. Coordinated drone strikes sowed chaos among the larger vessels, while Helios platforms continued to rain destruction from the flanks. As the battle neared Earth, the Drakthar's losses became impossible to ignore. Their mighty dreadnoughts, once symbols of their invincibility, were falling one by one. For every human ship destroyed, 3 Drakthar vessels were lost. The Drakthar Supreme Commander, aboard the Blood Fang, realized too late that humanity's preparations had outmatched their raw power. Humanity's final move came when the Blood Fang itself was isolated. Using cloaked decoy ships to lure the remaining Drakthar forces away, the Aegis fleet concentrated all firepower on the flagship. Disruption weapons rendered its shields useless, and the Vanguard-class ships closed in for the kill. The Bloodfang burned in the dark, its destruction marking the collapse of the Drakthar invasion. As the remnants of the Drakthar fleet retreated, the Sol system fell silent once more. The battle was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. The Drakthar had sought to destroy Earth, but instead they had shattered their own empire. For the first time in history, the galaxy had witnessed the defeat of its strongest species. The cost of the victory was staggering: millions of lives lost, countless ships destroyed, and entire colonies scarred by the war. But humanity had proven what it was capable of. The Drakthar, once the galaxy's greatest threat, had been humbled. And as the stars settled over Earth, the message to the galaxy was clear: humanity was here to stay. The Drakthar fleet had fled, its remnants scattered across the galaxy. The battle for Earth, humanity's ultimate stand, had ended in a triumph that no one could have predicted. As the debris of countless ships drifted through the void, humanity stood bloodied but unbroken. For the first time in millennia, the Drakthar Empire had tasted defeat not at the hands of an ancient galactic power, but a species they had dismissed as insignificant. News of the Drakthar's crushing loss spread like wildfire across the stars. The oppressed species of the galaxy, long resigned to servitude, now saw a crack in the armor of their overlords. The idea that the Drakthar could be challenged, let alone defeated, was no longer a distant fantasy. On worlds where Drakthar banners had flown unchallenged for centuries, rebellions erupted. Underground resistance movements rose to the surface, emboldened by the knowledge that humanity had forced their oppressors into retreat. But victory came with a price. Earth bore the scars of the Drakthar's assault. Though the planet itself had been spared destruction, its skies were darkened by the remains of fallen ships. Massive craters marked the sites of ground invasions and orbital bombardments. Cities lay in ruins, their survivors huddled in shelters, mourning the countless lives lost. The other colonies fared no better. The cost of the war had touched every corner of human space. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity turned its focus inward, working tirelessly to rebuild. Engineers and scientists salvaged the wreckage of both human and Drakthar ships, piecing together new technologies to ensure humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The advancements made during the war, disruption weapons, cloaking systems, Helios platforms, became the foundation for a new era of human progress. The United Terran Command, once a loosely coordinated defense force, was restructured into the Terran Vanguard. No longer would humanity stand alone in the face of galactic threats. The Vanguard became a symbol of unity, its purpose not just to defend Earth but to safeguard all of humanity's colonies and interests. For the first time in history, humanity's factions set aside their differences to create a truly united front. Meanwhile, the Drakthar Empire faced an uncertain future. The defeat at Earth had shattered their illusion of invincibility. Entire fleets had been destroyed, their resources depleted, and their territories in open revolt. Their leadership, once a beacon of fear and control, now scrambled to maintain order. Warlords who had once worked together began turning on each other, blaming their failure on betrayal or incompetence. The once mighty Drakthar Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Yet humanity did not let its guard down. We understood that desperation made the Drakthar dangerous. Though they had been humbled, their pride was not easily extinguished. Surveillance networks and intelligence operations were expanded, keeping a watchful eye on their movements. Even in their decline, the Drakthar posed a potential threat, and humanity knew the cost of complacency. As the years passed, humanity's role in the galaxy began to shift. Where we had once been seen as a fledgling species struggling to survive, we were now a symbol of resilience and defiance. Diplomatic channels opened with species that had once ignored or dismissed us. Alliances were forged, trade agreements established, and scientific collaborations blossomed. For the first time, humanity was no longer alone. The galaxy began to see humanity not just as survivors, but as innovators, strategists, and warriors. The lessons of the war became part of our identity. We had learned how to adapt, how to fight against impossible odds, and how to unite in the face of extinction. The Drakthar's greatest mistake had been to underestimate us, and it had cost them everything. But humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or its ships, but in its spirit. The war had brought immense suffering, but it had also revealed the boundless potential of our species. We were not merely fighting for survival, we were fighting for a future, for a place among the stars. In the ruins of the Drakthar Empire, whispers began to circulate. The stories of humanity's victory spread to even the most distant corners of the galaxy. For some, it was a warning, a reminder that no power, no matter how strong, was invincible. For others, it was a beacon of hope, a testament to the strength of the weak when united. And so, humanity's legacy was forged not in the shadow of defeat, but in the light of triumph. The Drakthar had sought to dominate us, but instead they had catalyzed our rise. The galaxy's strongest species had challenged humanity and lost. As the stars continued to shine over a battered but unbroken Earth, one thing became clear. The echoes of this victory would be heard for generations to come. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, and no one would ever doubt us again. Thank you for joining us on Starlight Sci-Fi. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay curious, stay bold, and keep reaching for the stars.